Naomi Green stood in front of her bedroom mirror, straightening the lapels of her blazer. The soft morning light streamed through the curtains, casting a golden hue over her modest but neatly organized apartment. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted her name badge, her first official marker of her new role. This wasn't just another job for Naomi, it was a fresh start, a way to redefine herself after years of feeling like a shadow in her family's legacy. Today was her first day at Titan Corp, a company she had always admired from afar, and she was determined to prove her worth. The streets of Riverview Heights bustled with the rhythm of a city waking up. Naomi's heels clicked against the pavement as she walked briskly to the towering glass building that housed Titan Corp's headquarters. It was an impressive sight, a testament to the city's transformation from an old manufacturing hub into a thriving tech epicenter. Naomi couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as she looked up at the logo shining brightly above the entrance. What no one else knew was that she had a deep, personal connection to this place, one she had carefully kept under wraps. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Employees hurried about, clutching coffee cups and laptops, their conversations blending into a symphony of ambition. Naomi approached the receptionist's desk, where a middle-aged woman with a warm smile handed her a visitor's badge. "Welcome to Titan Corp, Ms. Green. First day nerves?" Naomi returned the smile, masking her anxiety. "A little, but I'm ready." She made her way to the elevator, joining a group of employees who seemed oblivious to her presence. As the elevator ascended, she caught snippets of their conversation, speculations about a big client meeting and murmurs of discontent about someone named Westbrook. The name didn't mean much to Naomi then, but she'd soon learn it was a name that carried weight and dread in equal measure. The marketing floor was a hive of activity. Naomi's new role as a junior assistant in the department wasn't glamorous, but it was an opportunity to get her foot in the door. She found her assigned desk and began organizing her workspace, trying to ignore the curious glances of her colleagues. It wasn't long before the man himself appeared, James Westbrook, the department head. Westbrook was a tall, imposing figure with a commanding presence. His perfectly tailored suit and slicked-back hair gave him an air of authority, but there was something about his sharp gaze that made Naomi uneasy. He walked with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable, his voice booming as he barked orders and demanded updates from his team. When he finally turned his attention to Naomi, she felt the weight of his scrutiny. "You must be the new girl," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "Naomi, right? Or is it Natalie? Whatever. Just make sure you're not here to waste my time." Taken aback by his rudeness, Naomi managed a polite nod. "It's Naomi, sir. I'm here to help in any way I can." Westbrook smirked. "We'll see about that. Just don't screw up." The encounter left Naomi shaken, but she resolved not to let it affect her performance. She threw herself into her tasks, meticulously completing every assignment and even staying late to ensure everything was perfect. Despite her efforts, it seemed nothing she did was good enough for Westbrook. He found fault in her work at every turn, berating her in front of her colleagues and making snide comments about her capabilities. "Did they hire you straight out of high school?" he sneered one afternoon, waving a report she had spent hours perfecting. "This is amateur work." Naomi bit her tongue, refusing to let his words break her composure. She had faced tougher battles in her life and wasn't about to let a bully like Westbrook derail her. But as the days turned into weeks, the constant humiliation began to take its toll. One particularly grueling morning, Naomi arrived at the office early to prepare for a major client presentation. She had barely taken a sip of her coffee when Westbrook stormed in, his face red with anger. "What is this mess?" he bellowed, pointing to a stack of files on her desk. Naomi looked at him, confused. "These are the materials for the presentation, sir. I've double-checked everything." "Don't talk back to me," he snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "Do you think you're smarter than me? Do you think you know how to do my job better than I do? The room fell silent as everyone turned to watch the confrontation. Naomi felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but she held her ground. No, sir. I just wanted to ensure everything was ready for the meeting. Westbrook's eyes narrowed. Ready? We'll see about that. He grabbed the files and marched into the conference room, leaving Naomi standing there, humiliated but determined. As she returned to her desk, Alicia Johnson, a senior member of the team, approached her. Don't let him get to you, Alicia said softly. He's always like this. Most of us have learned to keep our heads down and avoid his wrath. Naomi appreciated Alicia's kindness, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change. She couldn't understand how someone like Westbrook had managed to climb the corporate ladder, leaving a trail of demoralized employees in his wake. That afternoon, Naomi overheard Westbrook talking to another manager about the CEO, Elijah Green. The old man's losing his edge, Westbrook said with a chuckle. If I were in charge, this company would be unstoppable. Naomi's heart raced. She had spent her entire life admiring her father's vision and dedication to Titan Corp. Hearing someone like Westbrook belittle him was infuriating, but she knew revealing her connection to the CEO would only complicate matters. For now, she would remain silent, observing and waiting for the right moment to act. As the day ended, Naomi walked out of the building, the weight of Westbrook's words heavy on her shoulders. She glanced back at the towering structure, a mix of pride and frustration swirling within her. This wasn't just a job to her, it was a chance to honor her father's legacy and make a difference. But she couldn't do it alone. Unbeknownst to her, Alicia watched her leave, a thoughtful expression on her face. There was something different about Naomi, something that hinted at a strength and determination that could shake the very foundation of Titan Corp. The stage was set, and the first threads of change were beginning to unravel. Riverview Heights wasn't always a city defined by sleek skyscrapers and tech startups. It had once been a hub of steel mills and family-run businesses, where everyone knew their neighbor and the heartbeat of the community was the laughter and toil of its people. Naomi Green remembered those days fondly, though they felt like distant memories. Her father, Elijah Green, had been a larger-than-life figure in the city's narrative, a man of vision and principle who had transformed Titan Corp from a small manufacturing firm into a global tech giant. Yet, despite his success, Elijah had always remained a grounded, approachable man who valued integrity above all else. Naomi had inherited those values, even if she'd spent most of her life trying to escape the shadow they cast. Years ago, tragedy struck the Green family when Naomi's mother, Claire, passed away suddenly from a rare illness. The loss had fractured their once close family, driving a wedge between Naomi and her older brother, Marcus. While Elijah threw himself into his work to cope, Marcus became distant, eventually taking a silent partner role in Titan Corp and retreating from public life. Naomi, still a teenager at the time, felt adrift, unsure how to navigate the void left by her mother. She vowed to carve her own path, one that didn't rely on her family name or its legacy. But returning to Riverview Heights after her father's health began to decline had been a bittersweet homecoming. The city had changed, and so had Naomi. She wasn't the wide-eyed girl who used to run through the old factory corridors while her father held meetings. She was now a determined young woman who believed in earning her place, even if it meant starting at the bottom. That's why she had chosen to apply for a position at Titan Corp under an alias, hiding her true identity to avoid favoritism. She wanted to see the company through the eyes of an ordinary employee, to understand its culture from the ground up. What Naomi hadn't anticipated was just how deeply the company had strayed from her father's vision. In her first weeks, she had seen glimpses of a workplace ruled by fear rather than inspiration. While some departments thrived under passionate leaders, others, like marketing under James Westbrook, were plagued by dysfunction and toxic behavior. It was clear to her that Westbrook thrived on control, using his position to intimidate rather than uplift. But Titan Corp's problems weren't confined to the walls of its offices. The city itself bore the marks of inequality and unrest. While the downtown area glittered with the success of the tech boom, the outskirts of Riverview Heights told a different story. Old neighborhoods had been neglected, their once vibrant communities struggling to keep up with the rapid pace of change. Naomi couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt every time she passed the shuttered shops and crumbling homes, knowing that her family's company had played a role in the city's transformation. It was during one of these moments of reflection that Naomi ran into Marcus. She had been walking through the Riverview Public Park, a place she and her brother used to visit with their parents on weekends. Marcus was sitting on a bench near the fountain, his sharp features softened by an uncharacteristic weariness. Naomi hesitated for a moment before approaching him. "You still come here?" she asked, her voice tentative. Marcus looked up, surprised. "Naomi," he said, a flicker of warmth in his tone. "I didn't expect to see you here." They sat together in silence for a while, the sound of children playing in the background filling the gaps between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. "How's Dad?" "He's holding up," Naomi replied. "But you'd know that if you visited more often." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "It's complicated." "It doesn't have to be," Naomi countered. "He needs us, Marcus. And whether you like it or not, we're a part of his legacy. Titan Corp is part of that legacy." Marcus's expression darkened. "That company isn't what it used to be, Naomi. You think I don't know what's happening there? The corruption, the backstabbing? Westbrook and his cronies have turned it into a cesspool." Naomi's heart sank. "Then why don't you do something about it?" "Because every time I try, I'm met with resistance," Marcus admitted. "The board is full of people who only care about profits. Dad doesn't have the energy to fight them anymore, and I just don't know if it's worth it." Naomi looked at her brother, seeing the weight of years of frustration and regret etched into his face. She reached out, placing a hand on his. "It is worth it, Marcus. We can't just stand by and watch everything Dad built fall apart. We owe him more than that." Their conversation lingered in Naomi's mind as she returned to work the next day. She began to notice things she hadn't before, subtle signs of discontent among her colleagues, whispers of unethical practices, and the growing divide between the company's leadership and its employees. The more she observed, the clearer it became that Westbrook was at the center of many of these issues. One afternoon, Naomi overheard a heated conversation between Alicia and another employee, a junior analyst named Eric. They were in the break room, their voices low but urgent. "He's pushing for those budget cuts again," Eric said, frustration evident in his tone. "It's going to kill the project." Alicia shook her head. "He doesn't care about the project, Eric. He cares about padding his quarterly numbers. That's all Westbrook ever cares about." Naomi's curiosity was piqued. She had suspected that Westbrook's abrasive personality masked deeper flaws, but this was the first time she had heard specific accusations. She decided to approach Alicia later that day, hoping to learn more. "Alicia," she said as they walked out of the office together. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Alicia replied, her expression cautious. "What's going on with the budget cuts Eric mentioned? Is it something I should be worried about?" Alicia hesitated before answering. "Look, Naomi, you seem like a good person, so I'll be honest with you. Westbrook has been playing games with the numbers for months. He cuts corners and shifts blame to make himself look good. It's only a matter of time before it catches up to him, but until then, everyone else has to suffer." Naomi felt a surge of anger. She couldn't stand the thought of someone like Westbrook exploiting his position while others bore the consequences. But she also knew she couldn't act impulsively. She needed a plan, one that would expose the truth without jeopardizing her position, or the company's future. That night, Naomi sat in her apartment, surrounded by stacks of papers and her laptop. She began to dig into Titan Corp's financial records, using her insider knowledge to identify patterns and discrepancies. The more she uncovered, the more convinced she became that Westbrook was involved in something far worse than mismanagement. But she also realized she couldn't do this alone. Naomi picked up her phone and called Marcus. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady but resolute. There was a pause on the other end before Marcus replied. "What's going on?" "I think I've found something," Naomi said. "Something that could take Westbrook down. But I need someone who knows how to navigate the boardroom politics to back me up." Marcus sighed. "This is going to get messy, Naomi." "I know," she said. "But if we don't do something, who will?" As she hung up the phone, Naomi felt a newfound sense of determination. She didn't know what the days ahead would bring, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. This wasn't just about exposing Westbrook or protecting her father's legacy, it was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Naomi stood in front of her apartment window late that night, the lights of Riverview Heights glittering in the distance. Her conversation with Marcus replayed in her mind, each word solidifying her resolve. She had always believed in fighting for what was right, but this situation was bigger than she had imagined. Westbrook wasn't just a bully, he was a manipulator, and the stakes were higher than just her dignity. Titan Corp's integrity, and her father's legacy, was at risk. The following morning, Naomi arrived at work earlier than usual. She had spent the night compiling everything she'd uncovered about Westbrook's financial schemes. While she couldn't access all the internal systems herself, the anomalies in the public records were enough to raise suspicion. Marcus had agreed to meet her later that evening to go over the evidence, but for now, she needed to keep up appearances and gather more information. As the office began to fill with the usual hustle and bustle, Naomi slipped into the break room to grab a coffee. She was startled to find Eric already there, pacing nervously and muttering under his breath. "Eric?" she asked cautiously. He jumped, nearly spilling his coffee. "Oh, Naomi. I didn't see you there." "Are you okay?" she asked, genuinely concerned. Eric hesitated, glancing around to make sure they were alone. I'm not sure," he admitted. "It's just, things aren't adding up. Have you noticed how Westbrook has been pushing everyone to cut corners on the Snyder project? It doesn't make sense. If we don't deliver on time, we'll lose the client, but he doesn't seem to care." Naomi nodded, her suspicions confirmed. "I've noticed. And I think it's part of a bigger problem." Eric's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I can't explain everything right now," she said carefully. "But I think Westbrook's actions are more than just bad management. I'm looking into it." Eric looked uneasy but didn't press further. "If there's anything I can do to help, let me know," he said before hurrying out of the room. Naomi took a deep breath, her mind racing. She didn't want to drag her colleagues into this mess, but she couldn't ignore the fact that many of them were already suffering because of Westbrook's decisions. Alicia, Eric, and others had confided in her about the toxic atmosphere, but no one seemed willing to challenge him directly. That's when Naomi realized she had to be the one to act. Throughout the day, Naomi carefully observed Westbrook. He was as domineering as ever, barking orders and dismissing questions with a wave of his hand. But there was something else, an edge of impatience, as if he were hiding something. Naomi watched as he disappeared into his office for hours at a time, emerging only to berate his team or make vague demands. By the time the workday ended, Naomi was exhausted but determined. She packed up her notes and headed to the quiet cafe where she had agreed to meet Marcus. Her brother was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop open in front of him. He looked up as she approached, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Naomi," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "Let's see what you've got." She handed him a folder filled with printed reports and spreadsheets, explaining what she had found. Marcus listened intently, occasionally interrupting with questions or clarifications. By the time she finished, his expression was grim. "This is worse than I thought," he said, shaking his head. "If these numbers are accurate, Westbrook has been funneling funds from legitimate projects into bogus accounts. He's inflating his department's profitability while sabotaging other teams. It's blatant fraud." Naomi nodded. "I had a feeling, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without your input. What do we do now?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind clearly racing. "We need more evidence, something concrete that ties him to these accounts. And we need to be careful. If Westbrook gets wind of this, he'll do everything in his power to cover his tracks and discredit anyone who challenges him." Naomi felt a surge of frustration. How has he gotten away with this for so long? Doesn't anyone else see what's happening? "They see it," Marcus said quietly. "But people like Westbrook thrive on fear and intimidation. Most employees are too scared to speak up, and the board is too focused on profits to question his methods. It's a toxic system, and he's exploiting it perfectly." They spent the next hour devising a plan. Marcus would use his access as a shareholder to dig deeper into the financial records, while Naomi would continue gathering information from within the marketing department. They agreed to meet again in a few days to assess their progress. As Naomi left the cafe, she felt a mix of hope and apprehension. She knew they were taking a huge risk, but she also knew they had no choice. Westbrook's actions weren't just unethical, they were dangerous. If he wasn't stopped, the fallout could destroy not only Titan Corp but the livelihoods of countless employees. The next day, Naomi arrived at the office with renewed focus. She kept her interactions with Westbrook brief, avoiding anything that might draw his attention. Instead, she focused on building trust with her colleagues, subtly encouraging them to share their concerns. Alicia, in particular, proved to be a valuable ally. "I've been with this company for over a decade," Alicia confided during a lunch break. "And I've seen my share of difficult managers. But Westbrook? He's on another level. The way he pits people against each other, the way he manipulates the numbers, it's like he thrives on chaos." Naomi hesitated, wondering how much she could reveal. "If you had proof of his wrongdoing, would you speak up?" Alicia looked surprised but didn't hesitate. "In a heartbeat. But getting proof is the hard part. He's careful, and he has the board wrapped around his finger." That evening, Naomi shared Alicia's insights with Marcus, who had made significant progress in his investigation. "I found something," he said, his voice tense with excitement. "Westbrook's been using a shell company to siphon funds. It's registered under a fake name, but the transactions are all tied to Titan Corp accounts. This is the smoking gun we need." Naomi felt a surge of relief. "What's the next step?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "We need to present this to the board, but we can't go in unprepared. Westbrook is going to fight back, and we need to be ready for whatever he throws at us." As they strategized late into the night, Naomi couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about taking down Westbrook, it was about restoring integrity to the company her father had built. But as she prepared for the battle ahead, Naomi knew one thing for certain: the fight was far from over, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The tension in the air at Titan Corp was palpable. Naomi moved through the halls, her steps measured, her face calm despite the storm brewing inside her. With every passing day, the weight of what she and Marcus had uncovered pressed harder on her chest. Westbrook's corruption wasn't just a professional scandal, it was a betrayal of everything her father had stood for. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about people, about the employees who had dedicated their lives to this company and the communities that relied on its integrity. Marcus had spent the past 2 nights compiling a damning presentation that tied all the loose ends together. Naomi, meanwhile, had been subtly rallying support from within the company. While she couldn't outright reveal her intentions, she had managed to gauge who might stand with her when the truth came to light. Alicia, of course, had been the first to pledge her support. Eric, after some hesitation, also agreed to help in any way he could. Others, while not explicitly committed, had voiced their frustrations about the company's current direction, giving Naomi hope that the tide could turn. The plan was simple but risky. Marcus would call an emergency board meeting under the pretense of discussing quarterly performance. Once the board members were assembled, they would present the evidence, leaving Westbrook no room to deflect or deny his actions. But there was one glaring problem: Westbrook wasn't stupid. He had years of experience manipulating situations to his advantage, and Naomi knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. That morning, as Naomi entered the building, she noticed an unusual buzz among her colleagues. People were whispering in corners, their eyes darting toward the executive offices. She stopped by Alicia's desk, lowering her voice. "Did something happen?" Alicia glanced around before leaning in. "Westbrook's been in and out of meetings all morning. Word is, he's on edge. Someone tipped him off about an internal investigation." Naomi's stomach dropped. If Westbrook suspected anything, he would double down on covering his tracks. Worse, he might retaliate against anyone he perceived as a threat. She hurried to her desk, her mind racing. She needed to warn Marcus, but calling him during business hours could raise suspicion. Instead, she sent a carefully worded text. "He knows something. Be ready for pushback." By lunchtime, Naomi's anxiety had only grown. She kept her head down, avoiding Westbrook's gaze whenever he passed by. But her heart nearly stopped when she heard her name called over the intercom. "Naomi Green, please report to James Westbrook's office immediately." Colleagues glanced at her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and sympathy. Alicia gave her a worried look as Naomi stood, forcing herself to appear calm. She walked to Westbrook's office, her mind rehearsing possible scenarios. Westbrook was waiting for her, his imposing figure framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. His expression was unreadable, but his sharp eyes studied her as she entered. "Naomi," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat." She sat, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been hearing some interesting things," he began, his tone casual but laced with menace. "It seems you've been asking a lot of questions lately. Questions about budgets, projects, and other sensitive matters." Naomi met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm just trying to understand how things work around here." "Isn't that what you hired me to do?" Westbrook's lips curled into a faint smile. "Smart answer. But let me give you some advice, Naomi. Curiosity can be dangerous, especially when it's directed at things that don't concern you." "Dangerous?" she repeated, her voice steady. "I wasn't aware that asking questions was a threat." His smile vanished, replaced by a cold glare. "You're new here, so I'll cut you some slack. But if I find out you're meddling in things you shouldn't be, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" Naomi forced herself to nod, though her pulse was racing. "Crystal clear." Westbrook leaned back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on her. "Good. You're dismissed." She stood and left the office, her hands trembling as she closed the door behind her. The encounter had rattled her, but it had also confirmed her suspicions. Westbrook was onto her, and he was prepared to protect himself at all costs. When she finally reached a quiet corner, she sent another text to Marcus: "We need to move faster. He's watching me." That evening, Naomi met Marcus at their father's house. Elijah Green had always been a man of quiet strength, but the years, and his illness, had taken their toll. He sat in his favorite armchair, a blanket draped over his lap, as Marcus and Naomi explained the situation. Elijah listened intently, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "I always knew Westbrook was ambitious," he said finally. "But I never thought he'd stoop this low. Naomi, Marcus, are you sure you're ready for this? Taking him down won't be easy." "We don't have a choice," Naomi said firmly. "If we don't act now, he'll only get worse. And the longer this goes on, the more people will suffer." Elijah nodded, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Then you have my support. Do what you need to do." The following day, Marcus called the emergency board meeting. Naomi wasn't allowed in the room, but she waited anxiously outside, pacing the hallway as the minutes ticked by. She knew Marcus was presenting their evidence, exposing Westbrook's schemes in meticulous detail. Finally, the door opened, and the board members began filing out. Their expressions ranged from shock to anger, and Naomi's heart sank when she saw Westbrook emerge, his face pale but composed. He spotted her and paused, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't over," he said quietly before walking away. Marcus appeared moments later, his expression triumphant but cautious. "They've suspended him pending a full investigation," he said. "It's a start." Naomi exhaled, relief washing over her. But she knew Marcus was right, this was only the beginning. Westbrook wouldn't go down without a fight, and the days ahead would be fraught with challenges. Still, for the first time in weeks, Naomi felt a glimmer of hope. Together, she and Marcus had taken the first step toward reclaiming their father's legacy. And no matter what came next, she was ready to see it through. The days following Westbrook's suspension were a whirlwind of activity and tension. Titan Corp's halls buzzed with speculation, whispered conversations filling every corner. Naomi became a central figure in the storm, though most of her colleagues were unaware of the role she had played. To them, she was just another employee, quietly navigating the chaos. But in truth, Naomi was far from passive. She and Marcus had lit the fuse, and now the explosion was rippling through every level of the company. The board had acted swiftly to appoint an interim executive to oversee Westbrook's responsibilities while the investigation continued. Naomi watched with a mix of relief and apprehension as the new acting VP, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Clara Dunn, introduced herself to the team. Clara had a reputation for being thorough and impartial, and Naomi hoped she would bring the same rigor to this case. Clara wasted no time asserting her authority. On her first day, she called a department-wide meeting, addressing the elephant in the room head-on. "Let me be clear," Clara said, her voice calm but firm. Titan Corp is facing serious allegations that threaten the integrity of this organization. My job is to ensure transparency and fairness as we navigate this process. If any of you have information relevant to the ongoing investigation, now is the time to come forward. The room was silent, employees exchanging uneasy glances. Naomi kept her expression neutral, though her heart was pounding. Clara's call for transparency was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was an opportunity to rally support. On the other, it meant Westbrook's allies might seize the chance to muddy the waters. Over the next few days, Naomi focused on strengthening her alliances within the company. Alicia proved invaluable, helping to discreetly spread the word about Clara's willingness to listen. Several employees, emboldened by the change in leadership, began to share their experiences. Stories of Westbrook's bullying, manipulation, and questionable decisions painted a damning picture of his tenure. But Naomi knew it wasn't enough. While the personal accounts highlighted Westbrook's toxic behavior, they didn't directly tie him to the financial misconduct. That's where Marcus came in. Late one evening, Naomi met Marcus at a co-working space downtown. He had spent the week poring over Titan Corp's financial records, using his shareholder access to dig deeper into Westbrook's schemes. "I've found more," Marcus said, his voice tinged with exhaustion and determination. "There are multiple shell companies, not just one. He's been using them to funnel money out of Titan Corp for years. And get this, the most recent transactions coincide with the Snyder Project delays. Naomi frowned. So he's sabotaging projects to cover his tracks? How did he think no one would notice? Marcus smirked. Because he's been manipulating the internal reporting systems. Every time a red flag pops up, he buries it under layers of fake data. But here's the kicker, one of the shell companies is tied to a personal account. It's under an alias, but the address matches his vacation home. Naomi's eyes widened. That's it. That's the proof we need. Marcus nodded. It's enough to nail him, but we need to present it carefully. If we don't, he'll find a way to spin this. The siblings spent the next few hours refining their presentation. They knew they couldn't afford any mistakes. Every piece of evidence needed to be airtight, every argument unassailable. By the time they finished, it was well past midnight, but they were ready. The next morning, Naomi approached Clara in her office. She handed over the meticulously organized files, explaining the significance of each document. Clara listened intently, her sharp eyes scanning the pages as Naomi spoke. This is compelling, Clara said when Naomi finished. But it's also explosive. If we move forward with this, it could have far-reaching consequences, for the company and for you. I understand, Naomi said firmly. But I'm not doing this for personal gain. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Clara studied her for a moment before nodding. I'll review everything thoroughly. If it checks out, we'll present it to the board. The waiting was excruciating. Naomi spent the next few days on edge, her every interaction tinged with the weight of what was at stake. Westbrook, meanwhile, remained conspicuously absent from the office. Rumors swirled that he was preparing a counterattack, though no one knew what form it would take. Finally, Clara called an emergency board meeting, this time inviting Naomi to attend. As Naomi entered the sleek conference room, she felt a surge of nerves. The board members were already seated, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Clara stood at the head of the table, projecting an air of calm authority. Thank you all for coming, Clara began. As you know, this investigation is critical to the future of Titan Corp. Today, we will review new evidence that sheds light on the allegations against James Westbrook. Naomi Green, who has played a key role in uncovering this information, will present her findings. Naomi stepped forward, her heart pounding as she began to speak. She outlined the financial anomalies, the shell companies, and the connections to Westbrook's personal accounts. She used visual aids to illustrate the patterns of fraud, ensuring that every point was clear and undeniable. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Several board members exchanged uneasy glances, their skepticism replaced by concern. This is serious, one of them said, breaking the silence. If this is true, Westbrook's actions could have significant legal and financial repercussions for the company. It is true, Clara said firmly. I've personally verified the documents. There's no question about their authenticity. The board deliberated for hours, discussing the implications and next steps. Finally, they reached a decision. Westbrook would be terminated immediately, and the evidence would be turned over to law enforcement for further investigation. Naomi felt a wave of relief as the board announced their verdict. But the relief was short-lived. As she left the meeting, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've made a powerful enemy. Watch your back. She stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Westbrook might have been ousted, but his threat still loomed large. Naomi knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt confident in her ability to face whatever came next. Titan Corp was worth fighting for, and she wasn't about to back down. Naomi stared at the ominous message on her phone, her stomach twisting into knots. She knew the battle with Westbrook wasn't over, even with his termination. The message was a reminder of the power he still wielded and the lengths he might go to protect himself. She locked her phone, inhaling deeply to steady her nerves. This wasn't the time to let fear take hold. She had come too far to back down now. The fallout from Westbrook's dismissal sent shockwaves through Titan Corp. Employees whispered in hallways about his swift removal, and the atmosphere was one of cautious optimism mixed with lingering uncertainty. Clara called another meeting, this time addressing the entire company. "I want to assure everyone that we are taking steps to restore trust and integrity to this organization," Clara said. "The board has implemented immediate changes to improve oversight and accountability. Titan Corp is more than any one individual, and together, we will move forward stronger." The speech was met with polite applause, but Naomi could sense the skepticism in the room. Rebuilding trust would take more than words. Actions had to follow. As Clara outlined plans for increased transparency and new leadership protocols, Naomi's mind drifted to the larger challenge ahead. Removing Westbrook was only the first step. His influence had seeped into multiple levels of the company, and rooting it out entirely would be a monumental task. That evening, Naomi and Marcus met again, this time in the comfort of their father's study. Elijah, though friendlier than before, was alert and eager to hear the latest developments. "You did it," he said with a proud smile after Naomi recounted the board's decision. "You stood up for what's right, just like I always knew you would." "We're not done yet," Naomi replied. "Westbrook might be out of Titan Corp, but he's still a threat. He won't take this lying down." Marcus nodded. "He's already started moving his chess pieces. I've been tracking his network. Some of his allies are still in key positions, both inside and outside the company." Elijah's expression grew somber. "Then you need to stay vigilant. People like Westbrook don't go down easily. But you have something he doesn't, integrity. Never lose sight of that." Over the next few weeks, Naomi threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She joined Clara's task force to implement the reforms discussed in the company meeting. Together, they overhauled internal auditing processes, revamped reporting structures, and created channels for employees to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Naomi also began to quietly build a coalition of allies within the company. Alicia, ever loyal and resourceful, helped identify individuals who shared their vision for a better Titan Corp. Eric, who had been skeptical at first, became one of their strongest supporters, using his technical expertise to identify lingering discrepancies in the company's systems. But Westbrook's shadow loomed large. Naomi started noticing subtle acts of sabotage, files disappearing, emails mysteriously lost, and whispered rumors undermining her credibility. One day, she arrived at her desk to find a threatening note scrawled on a piece of paper. "You think you've won, but this isn't over." She reported the incident to Clara, who took it seriously. Security was tightened, and an investigation was launched, but Naomi knew it wouldn't be easy to trace the source. Whoever was behind the threats was careful, leaving no obvious trail. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, a bombshell article was published in a prominent business journal, painting Naomi as a conniving upstart who had orchestrated Westbrook's downfall for personal gain. The article, filled with half-truths and outright lies, cited anonymous sources who claimed she had manipulated financial data and fabricated evidence. The backlash was swift. Social media exploded with debates about Naomi's character, and her inbox was flooded with hateful messages. At the office, colleagues who had once been friendly now avoided her gaze. Even some of her allies seemed hesitant, unsure of what to believe. Naomi was devastated but determined to fight back. Marcus, furious, suggested filing a defamation lawsuit, but Naomi had a different idea. "We need to expose the truth," she said. "Westbrook is behind this. He's trying to discredit me because he knows he can't refute the evidence we found. If we can prove his involvement, it'll turn the tide." Marcus nodded. I'll dig deeper into his connections. If he's behind this, we'll find the proof. Days turned into weeks as Marcus and Naomi worked tirelessly to uncover Westbrook's latest scheme. Finally, they found the smoking gun, a series of encrypted emails from Westbrook to a freelance journalist, offering payment in exchange for the hit piece. Marcus traced the funds to one of Westbrook's shell companies, the same ones they had exposed to the board. With this new evidence in hand, Naomi and Marcus approached Clara. Together, they crafted a plan to address the situation head-on. At the next company-wide meeting, Clara took the stage, her expression serious but resolute. "Recently, baseless accusations have been made against one of our own," she began. "Today, we're here to set the record straight." She presented the evidence of Westbrook's involvement in the smear campaign, detailing how he had orchestrated the attacks from behind the scenes. The room erupted in murmurs as employees realized the depths of his deceit. Naomi then stepped forward, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "I know the past few weeks have been challenging for all of us. But this isn't about me. It's about standing up to corruption and ensuring Titan Corp remains a company we can all be proud of. I won't let fear or intimidation stop me from doing what's right." The applause that followed was thunderous. Employees who had doubted her now approached with words of support, and her allies redoubled their efforts to help her finish what she had started. The fallout from the smear campaign backfired spectacularly on Westbrook. Law enforcement, already investigating his financial crimes, added charges of harassment and defamation to the growing list. His remaining allies at Titan Corp distanced themselves, unwilling to be dragged down with him. In the weeks that followed, Titan Corp began to heal. The reforms Naomi had championed started to take root, fostering a culture of accountability and transparency. Employees felt empowered to speak up, knowing their voices would be heard. As for Naomi, the ordeal had transformed her. She was no longer the wide-eyed newcomer trying to prove herself. She had faced down one of the most powerful men in the company and emerged stronger, more determined than ever to protect her father's legacy. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the city skyline, her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "We did it. Dad would be proud." Naomi smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude and resolve. The battle had been long and grueling, but it was worth it. Titan Corp was on a new path, and she knew this was only the beginning.